Hey everyone, I'm Eric Thomas of Eric Thomas Studios, and today we'll be talking about how to add some depth to your Illustrator designs using textures. So before we can add our textures, we'll need an illustration to add textures to. It can be grayscale or already have the colors in. If we don't have one, we'll need to make it here. But for the sake of the tutorial, we'll assume you already have one done and bring it into Illustrator. With our design open, there are a few ways we can texture things. The first and quickest is going to be done using strokes. Selecting an object, we can give it a stroke with the numbers up at the top left of Illustrator. This can be as big or small as needed. With the stroke applied, we can give it a bit of a different look then. Up at the top bar, there is a box with a line and the word basic. If we click this, we're shown a menu with various other shapes. When we click on any of those, we'll apply a shape and sometimes even blending modes across the stroke we've applied. This already lets us change things up by giving our shapes something other than a solid line around it. But as the default shapes, they tend to be pretty bland here. We could get a lot more options and shapes to work with though. Head up to the top of the window and click on the hamburger menu or that icon with 3 horizontal lines. Down near the bottom, we have the option to open brush libraries. These are sets of shapes we use here, such as artistic ink designs. We can apply any of these the same way, and they'll tend to give a lot more variety to the shapes we're working with. We can also use the brush profile, or that bar with a line and the word uniform, to change how the shape is applied across our stroke. I've done a whole tutorial on using these, which I'll put a card to here, if you want to learn to fully control that. But as you can see, just this is already one way to add some intrigue to the design. Another way to do it is to give our shapes some shading. We can do this as easily as pushing a button. Specifically, the small black and white button down at the bottom left of Illustrator under the 2 colored boxes. This will change the shape's color from a solid to a gradient fill, which applies quick, easy shading to the selected shape where you work from one color to another. Similarly, we can use a different kind of fill for these too. We'll first need to open up our Swatches menu if it's not already open. This gives a list of preset colors, gradients, and more relevant to our interests, patterns. We can apply any swatch in here to our shapes, strokes, and/or fills, which lets us do some texturing right in Illustrator. Again, we run into the defaults can be boring issue, and again, we can go up to the hamburger menu at the top right of the panel to get more options. Here, we'll be looking for the swatch library window. We have a lot of options here, but for my tutorial, I'll be going with one of the pattern presets. Specifically, I'm looking for some halftones like you would see in manga and comics. If you also want to use these, you'll find them, at least in Illustrator CC, under the basic graphics menu. They're named graphic dots. With any swatch, we just need to click on the swatch to apply the color, gradient, or patterns to the shape. It should be noted though that these will be applied to whichever part of your shape is active. This will either be the fill or the stroke. You can tell which one's active down on the bottom left. The shape that isn't covered is the active one, with the solid box being your fill and your stroke being the box with a cutout. You can switch which is active with the X key. On top of that, Illustrator also has some effects built in for texturing. To get to those, head up to the Effect menu up at the top. Down near the bottom, under the Photoshop effects, we have a whole menu of texture effects to add. For one example, there's the grain effect. This lets us add dots to the selected shapes, giving a bit of film grain and quick grit to the design. There are also a couple other effects, so I recommend experimenting and seeing what you can get. And the last way to texture our illustrations is by using photos of textures we'd want to add. We'll first need to actually drag the photo or photos into Illustrator so we can use them. When they're in there, we can drag them around, rotate them, and scale them as needed to fit the shapes we want them to be in. The photos, by default, will probably be completely opaque and might be a bit hard to position though. To get a better idea of how they fit, we can change the blending mode and opacity of the photos before we change them. This has the added bonus of letting us actually make sure beforehand that the photo blends with the shapes how we'd want them to. Once we have the photos blended in position how we want them, we probably have an issue where the texture is showing outside of the shape we want it to be in though. Unless we're actually working with big square shapes, which in my experience is a rarity. So, last up, let's fix that so the texture is contained in your shape. First, we need to select the shape we want the texture to be in and make a copy with Command or Control C. We can then paste it in place so it's in the exact same position using Command or Control Shift V. We'll then need to bring that new shape up in the layer stack above the texture. We can do that with Command or Control and typing the right bracket a few times until it pops over the photo. When it's on top, we'll hold down Shift and select the photo too. We can then type Command or Control 7, which will make the top shape a clipping mask, which means the texture will show up in the shape and be hidden outside of it. We can use this for our effects, gradients, and the rest as well. Now, this is all pretty cool, but it's not necessarily efficient. Having even a few photos in your AI file will mean a much bigger file and a longer time to open and save it, and there can be printing complications. Fortunately, there's another program built for doing this kind of photo work, and chances are good that if you have Illustrator, you also have Photoshop. So let's export the illustration we've made as a single image. Bringing that over into Photoshop, or just dragging the AI file in, we'll have a flat design to work with. Here, we'll do the same thing, where we can bring in our photos and do blending modes and opacity work. Using the various selection tools, we can then quickly pick areas in the selection. And using those, we can mask the photos into our areas. Just personal opinion, but this is way faster and more efficient than if I were to try to do all of the masking and photos required for the AI file. And that was all about texturing your illustrations. All of this together lets you add much more depth and interest to your design. I hope you've learned something and had fun doing it. If you have any feedback, you can let me know with a comment below or with a message to @ET_studios on Twitter. You can also like this video and share it around. I'd appreciate the help getting the word out. And I'm planning to be back here every Friday, so if you like this, be sure to subscribe for more awesome content. Have a great day, everyone.